Prince William did not merely make an announcement. He drew a line through the heart of the monarchy, and the entire United Kingdom felt the shock. In one controlled statement, delivered with a face carved from restraint, the Prince of Wales changed Queen Camilla's future inside the royal family forever. What sounded at first like protocol quickly became something far more personal, far more devastating, and far more impossible to reverse. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. William entered Kensington Palace that morning with the silence of a man who knew there was no gentle way to say what had been decided. Kensington Palace, one of the working royal homes, had seen announcements before, but this one carried weight. It was about the future reign, the period when the next king's authority would take shape. Aides stood back. Senior courtiers waited. Legal advisors watched the sealed royal statement, because a royal statement is an official message defining the crown's position. William knew words would not return quietly. The prince began with control, but control did not mean comfort. He announced that Camilla would no longer hold any future ceremonial authority in his reign, and that she would be excluded from succession-era planning, transition councils, and symbolic roles connected to his future kingship. A royal transition council, in plain terms, is the private planning group that prepares how power, duties, and public roles move from one reign to the next. That was why the room froze. This was not a small adjustment. This was William closing a door before Camilla could step through it. His hand tightened before the final sentence, because the prince understood who would feel the blow first: his father's wife, the queen consort, a woman who had fought for acceptance and now faced a future narrowed by the family she had entered. Camilla received the words inside Clarence House, and she did not speak when an aide read them aloud. Clarence House, her London residence with Charles, had once felt like refuge from public judgment, but now judgment had arrived. Her face shifted from disbelief to cold humiliation. Charles knew the decision was coming. He had seen the sealed internal review, a confidential palace assessment of influence over access, ceremony, and family decisions, and he had not stopped it. That silence became the first crack in the mystery. William was deciding what kind of monarchy he was willing to inherit, and before the palace could understand what William had done, it had to face the three people standing at the center of the storm. Behind the announcement stood three lives locked in a silent triangle. William, carrying the burden of the future; Camilla, fighting not to be erased from the institution she had spent years entering; and Charles, trapped between loyalty to his wife and the survival of the crown. This was not just a decision about ceremony. It was a family wound, reopened under the brightest and coldest national spotlight. William understood the danger before anyone else dared to say it aloud. Every symbolic role, every seat, every procession, every name placed near the future throne mattered, because monarchy survives on signs as much as laws. The future king did not see Camilla's role as a harmless detail. He saw it as part of the structure his reign would inherit. A ceremonial role, in plain words, means a public position at major royal events where presence itself sends a message. If the wrong message reached the nation, he believed the next chapter would begin already weakened. Camilla felt the decision differently. She had spent years walking through judgment, silence, and suspicion to stand beside Charles, and now William's words made her feel as if the palace had accepted her only for the present, never for the future. The queen consort turned to her private secretary after the announcement and asked one sharp question. Did he say I was unfit? That question stripped away every official phrase. It was no longer about protocol. It was about dignity, and she felt hers being removed in public. Charles sat alone after reading the statement, and the king did not call William. He placed the paper down with careful hands and stared ahead, caught between the woman beside him and the son who would carry the crown after him. The crown, simply put, means the monarchy's authority, duty, and public trust, not just a jeweled object. That was why his silence mattered. If he defended Camilla, he risked weakening William. If he defended William, he wounded her. Catherine had seen the pain before the room ever heard the words. Before the briefing, she watched William remove every emotional phrase from the statement, leaving only cold certainty. The Princess of Wales understood that his closest circle had warned him the announcement would look like punishment, but he insisted it was protection. Still, protection can cut like a blade. And that hidden incident, the one whispered about behind closed doors, had begun weeks earlier in a room where one careless demand changed everything. Every royal crisis has a moment everyone later perceives they did not see coming. For William, that moment happened during a private succession rehearsal at Windsor Castle, when Camilla challenged a ceremonial placement meant for Catherine, and demanded a voice in William's future court arrangements. The room went still. Charles looked away. Catherine said nothing, and William understood, in that silence, that the next reign could not begin with old conflicts still holding the door. William had entered that rehearsal expecting order, not resistance. Windsor Castle mattered, because it was not just another royal home. It was a working symbol of family history, authority, and continuity. The succession rehearsal was meant to settle private details before the country ever saw them. Succession, in plain words, means the planned passing of royal duty from one monarch to the next. That day, the palace was quietly arranging seating order, ceremonial access, household roles, and who would stand closest to the future king when the next chapter began. Camilla changed the temperature with one demand. She objected to Catherine being named first family representative in William's future coronation household plan, and the words landed hard. A coronation household plan means the private structure of people and duties prepared for the ceremony that marks a new monarch's reign. Catherine sat with her hands folded, calm but wounded, refusing to turn the moment into open conflict. The Princess of Wales understood that silence could be stronger than defense. But William saw what her restraint cost her. Charles looked away at the worst possible second. The king did not raise his voice, did not defend Camilla, and did not defend Catherine. That silence cut through William, because it showed him the old pattern still had power. Camilla then asked for written assurance that she would keep ceremonial influence during his reign. Written assurance, in simple terms, meant an official promise that could later be used to protect her position. Advisors shifted. One courtier lowered his eyes. Everyone understood the danger. William pushed his chair back slightly, not in rage, but in decision. The prince realized this was no longer about one seat, one role, or one ceremony. It was about whether his reign would begin under pressure from unresolved family wounds. Later, a senior courtier placed a confidential memo on his desk, titled, "Future Role Boundaries." A confidential memo is a private palace document used to record sensitive decisions before they become official. Once that memo reached Charles, the family crisis could no longer stay hidden inside Windsor walls. What began as a dispute over placement was about to become a confrontation no royal advisor could soften. The confrontation did not happen in public. It happened in a small private drawing room, away from cameras, where the silence was sharper than any headline. William stood near the window, Camilla near the door, and Charles between them like a man watching two futures collide. No raised voice was needed. The damage had already entered the room before anyone spoke, and every word after that only made it heavier. William had requested the meeting after the memo reached his desk. Clarence House mattered, because it was not neutral ground. It was the home Charles shared with Camilla, and every word spoken there carried personal weight. The memo had turned a private argument into a formal warning. A formal warning, in plain words, means an official signal that a decision is moving toward action. The prince did not come to debate feelings. He came to tell the queen consort that her future influence in his reign would be limited. Camilla gripped the back of a chair as if the room itself had shifted beneath her. She asked whether Catherine had asked for this, and William answered with cold clarity. The decision was his alone. Catherine's name still hung between them, because Camilla understood what the change meant. If the Princess of Wales stood closer to the future throne, then the queen consort would stand farther from it. That was the wound. Not the wording, not the procedure, the position. Charles lowered his eyes when Camilla turned toward him. the king's silence hit her before any official document could. An official document, in simple terms, is a written palace record that makes a decision harder to deny later. She needed Charles to defend her, but he did not. He looked at William, then at the floor, and in that small movement, she felt abandoned. The monarch loved his wife, but he also knew his son had already secured support from transition advisors. William did not soften the truth. Transition advisors are the private experts who help plan how royal power and duties pass into the next reign. Their support meant this meeting was not a negotiation. It was a warning before the announcement. Camilla asked whether she would still stand beside the family during future national ceremonies, and the prince refused to promise it. Charles finally spoke, his voice low and heavy. "Are you prepared for what this will cost us?" And once that question was spoken, the fight moved beyond emotion and into the machinery of power. Royal power rarely arrives as thunder. Sometimes it arrives as a folder placed quietly on polished wood. After the confrontation, William's decision moved through the hidden channels of the monarchy: advisors, protocols, transition plans, and the careful language of future authority. Yet at the center of it all was one human truth. The Prince of Wales was no longer asking permission to protect his reign. William sat alone with a senior constitutional advisor and began removing every soft edge from the draft. Future reign planning mattered because it shaped the monarchy before the crown ever changed hands. It decided who would stand where, who would advise whom, and who would carry symbolic weight when the next reign began. A constitutional advisor, in plain words, is someone who helps royal decisions fit within law, duty, and long-standing palace rules. The prince crossed out gentle phrases and replaced them with firm language. No future ceremonial authority. He did not smile. He did not pause. He knew every word would travel like a blade. Camilla's present status remained untouched, and that was the careful part. She would still be treated with respect beside Charles, but her place in William's future court could be limited before accession. Accession means the moment a new monarch takes the throne. That detail mattered because the decision did not need to attack the queen consort openly to change everything. It only needed to define the next chapter without her at the center. One palace aide warned that the move would look like William choosing Catherine's future position over Camilla's dignity, and the prince understood the danger. Still, he did not remove the line. Catherine entered briefly and saw the exhaustion on William's face. The Princess of Wales knew firmness could protect a monarchy, but she also knew it could wound a family. She told him that strength without cruelty still carries pain, and he looked down at the page because he already felt it. Catherine did not ask him to stop. She only reminded him that every public decision would leave a private scar. Charles gave no written objection. The king's silence allowed the process to continue, while saving him from a direct public break with Camilla. A written objection, simply put, would have been an official refusal that could halt or delay the decision. He gave none. That absence became permission, without the comfort of spoken support. The papers had moved quietly through the palace, but the moment Camilla understood their meaning, nothing about the family felt quiet anymore. There are moments when a palace does not need shouting to feel shaken. At Clarence House, the new reality arrived in a slim envelope, hand-delivered before lunch, its language formal and devastating. Camilla read it once, then again, as though the words might change if she refused to breathe. They did not. Her future had been narrowed by the man who would one day inherit everything she had fought to stand beside. Camilla received the formal notice in silence, and silence made it worse. The notice confirmed that she would no longer take part in future transition councils or symbolic reign planning events connected to William's monarchy. A transition council, in plain words, is a private group that helps prepare royal roles before a new reign begins. That mattered because this was not about one dinner, one appearance, or one family disagreement. It was about the shape of power after Charles. The queen consort could keep her present title, but the future had been drawn without her at the center. Camilla placed the envelope on a side table after her aide left. She refused tea. She sat alone, stunned by the clean cruelty of official language. A formal notice, simply put, is a written message that makes a decision real and difficult to undo. She had lived through public judgment before, but this felt different. This did not come from newspapers. It came from inside the family. It came from William. And the prince's decision told her that respect in the present did not guarantee influence in the future. Charles entered later, and found her waiting with the question already burning. The king did not need to ask what she had read. He knew. Camilla looked at him and asked whether he had let William do this because he agreed with him. Charles did not deny seeing the draft before release. That answer landed without being spoken. His silence had not been weakness. It had been part of the decision's power. Palace aides prepared two versions of public language. One sounded calm, built around continuity and respect. The other sounded defensive, ready for outrage. That alone proved they knew the story would explode. Camilla understood it too, because humiliation becomes heavier when people prepare for it before it even reaches you. But the deepest shock was still waiting. The emotional center of the crisis was about to shift away from her pain and toward the private reckoning between father and son. But the true turning point came not from the announcement itself, but from the father and son meeting behind a closed door. For all the shock outside the palace, the most important conversation happened in near silence. William came to see Charles not as a prince seeking approval, but as a son carrying a decision that had wounded the family. The king did not greet him with anger. He simply pointed to the chair opposite him. And in that small gesture, the monarchy became what it had always been beneath the gold, a family paying for power. William sat across from Charles at Buckingham Palace, and neither man reached for a file. Buckingham Palace mattered because it was more than a royal home. It was the working center of monarchy, the place where private pain often became public duty. No aides stood nearby. No documents softened the silence. A private meeting, in plain words, meant there was no official buffer, no one to translate emotion into careful palace language. The prince knew this meeting would decide whether the announcement had broken father and son apart, or finally forced them to speak honestly. Charles looked older in that silence. The king told William that Camilla felt publicly diminished, and he did not say it as an accusation. He said it like a husband carrying damage he could not repair. William listened, then answered that Catherine and the next reign could never begin under competing authority. The next reign, simply put, meant the future period when he would become king, and every royal role around him would send a message. That was why this decision mattered. It was not about one woman standing closer or farther away. It was about whether old loyalties would control a new monarchy before it even began. William admitted the announcement hurt him too. He told Charles that every hard decision involving Camilla pulled him back into old family pain, the kind the palace had buried but never healed. The prince did not call it revenge. He called it protection. Charles finally revealed, through a recorded private conversation later preserved in palace notes, that he had stayed silent because he knew his son was not acting out of anger. The king believed William feared unresolved loyalties could damage the crown. The crown, in plain language, means the monarchy's public duty, trust, and authority. Charles placed the unread public reaction briefing aside. A briefing is a prepared summary of how the palace expects people and media to respond. He looked at William and said, "Then make sure your reign is worth the pain this caused." The prince did not answer quickly, because the cost had finally been named. By morning, the palace no longer owned the story, because the country had already placed it on every front page. The next morning, Britain woke to a royal story that felt less like palace administration and more like a verdict. Across breakfast tables, train platforms, phone screens, and television studios, one question dominated the country. Had William protected the monarchy, or had he publicly wounded Camilla beyond repair? The announcement had escaped the palace walls, and now every image, headline, and whispered opinion turned into part of the judgment. Camilla saw the front page before anyone could hide it. At Clarence House, the paper carried a split image of William and the Queen Consort under the headline, "William draws the line." A front page matters because it turns a palace decision into a national symbol, something people feel before they fully understand. She stared at those words and understood the pain of being reduced to a headline. This was no longer a private boundary, it was public humiliation printed in black ink. William watched a muted television report with Catherine beside him. The prince did not need sound to know what was being said. Broadcasters framed the decision as his first major assertion of future royal authority. Future royal authority, in plain words, means the influence he will hold as the next king before the crown officially passes to him. That mattered because Britain was not just watching a family disagreement. The country was watching a future monarch test his power before the throne was his. Catherine stayed close, but she did not celebrate. The Princess of Wales understood that public support could still feel cruel when it came at someone else's expense. The palace released calm language about continuity, respect, and future planning. Continuity means keeping the monarchy stable through change, making the public believe the institution remains steady even when the family behind it is shaken. But people read beneath the words. They saw a son challenging his father's present. They saw a wife pushed away from a future she had expected to share. Buckingham Palace became the center of the public mood. A small crowd gathered outside the gates, and one woman held a handwritten sign that read, "The future has spoken." That single image captured the country's split feeling: shock, approval, sadness, and judgment all at once. A prominent broadcaster called it, in a recorded morning segment, the moment the next reign stepped out of the present king's shadow. William heard that line later and went still. Camilla heard it too, and it cut deeper than the headline. The final meaning of the announcement would not be decided by newspapers, crowds, or television voices. It would be decided by what each person accepted when the noise faded. And when the noise finally settled, the monarchy was left with the one verdict no statement could soften. In the end, William's announcement was not remembered because it shocked the nation. It was remembered because it revealed the shape of the monarchy to come. Camilla remained part of the present, but she no longer stood inside the future William was building. Charles had chosen silence, Catherine had chosen restraint, and William had chosen the burden of command. The verdict was painful, but it was clear. Camilla kept her present dignity, but her future ceremonial authority in William's reign was formally ended. That mattered, because ceremonial authority is more than standing at events. It means having a visible role in the public language of power. The Queen Consort was not stripped of who she was beside Charles, but she was removed from the command structure of what came next. The monarchy absorbed the shock by calling it necessary transition planning. Transition planning, in plain words, is the careful preparation of royal roles before a new reign begins. The palace wanted the country to see order, not punishment. But everyone inside the family understood the emotional cost. Camilla later attended a private family moment with composure, and that composure said more than anger ever could. She entered calmly, greeted Charles quietly, and did not reach for the central seat that once seemed possible. The king watched her restraint with visible pain, because he knew dignity can survive, even when influence does not. William stood across the room, no longer only the heir waiting for the future. He had become the man shaping it. Charles saw that change clearly. His son had crossed from patience into command. Catherine remained steady through it all. The Princess of Wales did not turn the decision into victory, and she did not wear Camilla's loss as triumph. Her quiet presence became the symbol of the next chapter, because she offered calm, where the family had known rivalry. William's emotional truth was simple. He did not remove Camilla from the future to humiliate her. He did it because he believed old wounds could not be allowed to govern a new reign. The future king chose pain now over confusion later. The verdict was final. Camilla remained respected in the present, but she no longer stood inside William's future authority. Charles accepted what silence had already allowed. Catherine became the steady center of what came next. And William stopped waiting for the monarchy to become stable. He began shaping it himself. This was the moment the crown stopped looking backward for permission and began moving forward under William's hand. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.